Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I just wanted to quickly go over the residency match odds for international students. It's kind of hard to find. It's on the document with all the colleges of pharmacy, but it is down here. Foreign school, non-ACPE, 61 international applicants, 43 earned an interview, 7 earned a residency placement, and 36 were unable to match. So let's look at the math itself. And you can see that 43 out of 61 were in that pool that was trying to get one. And usually this is the group that got at least one interview. So that's at 70%. But then when we look at the actual number of those 43 that placed, unfortunately, that's a match rate of 16%. And if you look at the number out of 61, it's closer to 11% or 10%. So about 1 in 10 international graduates will match with the U.S. residency, even though there are 4,000 residencies. And there are a number of reasons for that. But what I wanted to focus on was that number down at the bottom, which is that 7. What is it that 43 people who interview, only 7 get a placement? And if you were to match that, only 3 pharmacy schools in the United States are behind that. Now, this interview rate, 18 pharmacy schools are behind that interview rate. So the sites clearly value these students and so forth. But what makes it so that you have a higher interview rate, but a much, much lower match placement? And so I'm going to talk about kind of the big 3 as it comes to each piece. So there's the CV, the letter of intent, and then the interview if the person gets the interview. And what I want to talk about is a little bit of a different look at the CV. So traditionally we look at a CV as something that takes into account the things that we've done in our life. It's the curriculum vitae, literally the path that we've taken in life in the Latin. But what we want to know is, since certain programs are very flexible, my understanding is that UC San Diego, it's called the Bridge to Residency Pharmacy Program. There's one for physicians as well. And it's highly customizable, and they get to kind of pick which APPEs they want and what areas that they want. And I would think that when they're doing that, they would want to have certain residencies actually in mind, and make sure that their experiences are going to match to the core experiences and elective experiences at residencies. And I don't know, it looks like there's over 20 people in this picture. So are they really 1/3 of that residency application pool? That might be, I don't know. But what I want to make sure to get across is that if you are an international student, your LOI, your CV, and your recommendations must all be perfect, because you are matching at a rate of 10% or 1 in 10, or maybe that 15% even. But that means that applicant had everything on the up and up. Everything was looking good. So CV, LOI, and the interview, of course, had to go well as also. I'm going to be doing a new branding this year, and when I say this year, it's really within the next cycle. So after we're done with PGY or the phase 2 applications in March and things like that, I'll launch my site probably on WordPress rather than on Wix here. But what I wanted to kind of talk about is the idea behind this. So instead of being residencyhelp.com, where in September and October, I get a few people that I help, and then summer, I get some people as well. Some of the top people that I work with really want to start early, and that's smart. They use it as a plan. But that is really the exception, not the rule. In general, I get busy in November, but then December is absolutely crazy. And, of the 160 or so people that I helped, I would say that 80% easily fall into late November and December. And what I want to do is I want to spread that out quite a bit more. And I want to see more of a planning process rather than help me, I'm in a lot of trouble process. And so the idea behind Residency Planner is, what we're going to do with the CV is we're going to write our CV in our P3 year, before we even apply for APPEs. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the residency sites and we're going to see, okay, well, based on the residency sites that I'm looking at, what would the perfect CV look like? Okay, so let's first look at the APPEs and how those would fit in. What kind of leadership would this site expect? What kind of teaching? What kind of research? And all of those things. And to create a fictional CV that matches perfectly to the site. Then you go back to your school and say, okay, well, what can I build of this? Maybe you're in a new school and maybe leadership positions are not available. Or maybe you would have to start your own program, your own organization, or bring it to that campus. I know that some of the national organizations are really getting hit pretty hard because they are losing students, so that affects the national office as well. When it comes to planning, though, the first thing you're going to want to do is write your CV before you do your APPEs. Now, I understand you might not be in a position to do that. You might be in your, end of your P3 year, your P4 year. But now you want to still do that and say, okay, well, what can I do? What are the things in residency what are the things in my APPEs that I can do to make this happen? So when you are an international student and you're looking at your sites, you really want to have a vision of which sites I can possibly match to. Now, one of the things that you would have to worry about, for example, is, okay, so you're UCSD, you're just a couple hours away from LA, you'd say, oh, well, I'd love to be up at Cedars-Sinai. Well, Cedars-Sinai is pretty specific about who they take. And you'll see a lot of students from Southern Cal. You'll see students from UCSF. You might see a few students from the rest of the country. But in general, you're going to see that, kind of top schools going to Cedars-Sinai. And so what you want to do is say, okay, well, the first place I'm going to look is where did those 7 students match? Are those people that I can get in touch with and see if they've matched and kind of work that way? The other option is, do you have to have an accredited residency for what you want to do? If you just want to practice, does this have to be accredited? Or are you thinking, all right, well, maybe I'll do a fellowship or maybe I'll do something with managed care? Managed care especially is one that tends to have non-accredited residencies because the work that they do is more like getting a year of business experience. And there's some mix between the clinical and the business. But sometimes those sites are not exactly under the accreditation banner. But again, if you're an international student and you're trying to go it alone, I'm just telling you that your odds are, the odds are stacked against you. And I get that there are things as someone who's coming over to this country that you're already trying to figure out. And I get it. My dad's an immigrant. I didn't speak English when I first started in school. So I understand. But what I'm saying to you is, if you are an international applicant and want to get a residency in the States, you absolutely must be the very top of your group. And your pedigree, even if it's, a UC school or something like that, isn't going to be enough. Your letters have to be perfect. Your recommendations have to be perfect. Your CV has to be perfect. And just because it's grammatically correct doesn't mean that it follows all of the kind of grammarly things that you need in terms of engagement, in terms of clarity, in terms of clarity of purpose. What they're really looking for from a letter of intent is that you have clearly researched their site. You have clearly shown that your experience matches their offerings, and you have clearly shown that you are the top person that is applying, whether from the United States or not. So again, reach out to me, tonythepharmacist@gmail.com, if you've got questions. But again, I really want you to be aware of the odds and to know where you stand. So tonythepharmacist@gmail.com. I'm usually pretty quick about getting back to people. And then if you want to be on my email list, just come to residencyplanner.com. You'll see a little subscribe free to residencyhelp.com. I just got to change that. If you just put in, you don't have to put in anything but your first name and your email address. And then you'll get the podcast episodes every week and then some advice from me.